I'll start with the karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Welcome to the meeting of Kōrau Tōtōpū, and we're here for hearings on the ratings policy review. Before I start with the business of the meeting, I would like to congratulate Councillor MP Councillor Tamitha Paul. We're absolutely thrilled for you in your new role and all of the hard work that you have put in, and I know we're going to get chances to farewell you more formally when that comes, but just wanted to acknowledge that amazing achievement. Right, and so we'll move on to apologies, and apologies from Councillor McNulty, for Councillor Free for early departure, and from Councillor O'Neill for lateness. Is there any early departure? In future, it would be great if you could let me know in advance, just so to make sure that we're correct, but I think we're fine here. I will move those apologies. Do I have a seconder, Deputy Mayor Foon? And, sorry, laughing into the mic. Are we going to be all right for quorum? Are we too late to amend those apologies? Yes, we will add that. Yeah. Again, just be great to know in advance, because we do need to make sure that we have a quorum, especially when members of the public are giving up their time to come. Oh yes, few to still vote. Councillor Young, Councillor Calvert, Councillor Brown. Just the apologies. We're having, oh no, they're all working. It's carried. Does anybody have any conflict of interest? No? All right, so we'll move on to the confirmation of minutes. He whakataka koto ana au I te motini. I move the motion that we accept the minutes of our meeting held on 25th of October 2023. Mawai e tautoko, Councillor Panovich will second. And we'll put those to the vote. Oh, Councillor Wineta? That is carried. There are no items not on the agenda. And so we move on. There's no public participation, because it's all public participation in the form of hearings. So we do the motion after, do we? Yeah. Yep, great. All right, so we move on to our first submitter, who is very nice to see you, Mike Mellor. You're speaking as an individual, and so you'll have 5 minutes, including any time for questions, you know that. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Is the mic? Oh, Mike. See what I did there?
Is it on now? Yes. Nobody's ever said that to me before, you know. Thank you for the opportunity to talk on this document. I want to talk about the document. I have no particular opinion about the matters within the document, but I don't think the document cuts the mustard. I don't think that it tells you what it's trying to do. It justifies why it's trying to do it, and it doesn't tell you what the results will be. For instance, it's very short on the objectives about what for these particular initiatives. I'm talking particularly about changing the general rates differentials. It doesn't really say anything at all about how the proposals will achieve any objectives there may be. There's no explanation behind the figures chosen for each of the options. They're just pulled out of thin air as far as I could see. So no submitter's been able to make an informed opinion on those matters because there isn't any information there. So I suggest that you can't actually make an informed opinion on that because the information is not there. The only documented basis for decision is what other cities' ratios are, but that tells you nothing about why they have those ratios. And it says that this city includes the downtown levies, so what does that mean for commercial businesses that don't pay the downtown levy? They're not mentioned. Does it include, do the other cities include downtown levies? I don't know. There's no comparison of value for money. What do people get for those rates? And it talks about a slight decrease in business rates. I'm always nervous about subjective words like slight. Slight can mean all sorts of different things. But it doesn't make any comment about the 4% increase for the preferred option in residential rates, which there's no attempt to justify. And if you do accept the recommendation, ratepayers will find their rates are going to be 4% increased on top of whatever the increase is going to be anyway. And I think you have to seriously think about how you can justify that. This does not justify that. The document just says, basically it says we want to be like Hamilton. Because that's the only piece of concrete information in there. So my personal opinion is that you should send it back to the officers and say, do again and tell us what you want to achieve and how these proposals are going to achieve them. Thank you.
So questions of Mike. I guess I'm interested in what your view is of the substantive issue of that change in the differential from what you have been able to glean from the information or your own view.
Well, the document says that all sorts of matters have been taken into consideration, including who pays for what and what sort of benefit they get. So, but there's no mention of what that consideration involved. There's no identification of what the outcomes of that consideration were. I mean, I have no particular opinion about whether domestic ratepayers should be paying more and commercial ratepayers should be paying less. But there are obviously consequences for those decisions. And what will it mean for commercial ratepayers to have lower rates? How will that change the city? And if it's only a slight change, as described, why bother? Why not do it? What's the point of going through a change that, if slight means what I think it means, it's not going to have that much effect?
Yep. One more question from Councillor Randall.
Yes, I know that officers struggle sometimes to make both a readable and an accurate document. What would your suggestion be if you wanted to add more information? Do you think the document itself should be just more complete, or do you think it could be added, say, as an appendix just to try and give, I mean, is that the information that you think is missing in terms of getting more context about what does this change really mean?
That's the key word, context. And no, it says the council has considered who benefits or causes the need for the relevant expenditure, but it doesn't say. There's no indication of what that consideration was. It says we have also considered some Wellington-specific factors, goes into a few of them, but it doesn't say how those factors have been considered. The sort of thing you're talking about would be really helpful, and also tell us how these numbers came up. You know, it's got the preferred option is 3.25 to 1. Well, where did 3.25 to 1 come from? It says it's based on Hamilton, but Hamilton is 2.9765 to 1. It says the other options are 2.6 to 1 or 2 to 1, but there's no indication of where those figures came from. So there's no way, I think, that people can submit on that, and there's no way that you can actually make a decision on that because you haven't got the information behind them.
Okay, thanks. Good points.
Thanks, Mike. We're out of time. Appreciate you coming in to share your thoughts with us. Our next submitter is Jessie Richardson. Kia ora, Jessie. And you're speaking in as an individual as well, so you have 5 minutes. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks. Kia ora koutou. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. So I'm here to submit about the proposed vacant land in the inner city differential. So I'm not here to speak in particular in support or opposed to it, but rather to point out that I think that the issue that it's trying to solve, which is to do with inappropriate or insufficient use of land in the centre city and in Wellington in general, will not be solved by this differential. I don't think it matters that much whether you do it one way or the other, since it applies to, I think the document said, only 60 properties, and I think it's also concerning that perhaps the cost of actually administering that might be higher than the amount it would actually generate. But the thing that I am concerned about is that when other real solutions to these kinds of problems, to the issue of inadequate housing supply and inadequate land use in Wellington, are put before the council. I'm concerned that some councillors who might have voted for a vacant land differential might use that as saying, well, we've solved that problem, we don't need to consider other avenues. So the thing I want to stress is that this is not a real solution to the problem of land use in Wellington. So to kind of highlight what I mean by that, I'm thinking there are 3 kind of broad groups of properties that I think we need to be looking at in Wellington. The first is the ones that are well and truly actually empty. These are the only ones that would be, by my understanding, covered by this differential. But unfortunately, this is a very small group of properties. And as I think some people have pointed out, it's very easy to make your way around that kind of regulation by putting a shed or a fence or some other small piece of land of use on that land to say, look, it's not actually empty anymore. The second type of land that I think is the most important to look at is land that isn't actually physically completely empty, but for economic purposes might as well be. So in Wellington, we have about $4 billion, that's billion with a B, worth of land that doesn't have any improvements value on it. That doesn't mean it's literally physically empty, but it means it could be like, for example, a car park that just has some painted white lines on it and a little display where you can pay. Now that land wouldn't be covered by this kind of differential, to my understanding, but is very poor land use in Centre City Wellington and should be the kind of thing that council should be considering how the rating policy and broadly how council policy can try and disincentivize using land for those purposes and instead think about how that could be housing, commercial use, or green space. And then the third category of land also to think about is land that isn't empty and doesn't even have, isn't even zero improvement value, but is still significantly lower density than is optimal. So even if you have, say, a 1-story development somewhere in the CBD, that wouldn't be covered by any kind of approach that you would take, which is specific to vacant land, but that is still very poor land use, and you should still be thinking about how we can design a rate system and local government in general to ensure that we don't have less dense development in the centre city than what is needed. So overall, I think the kind of solutions that we need to be thinking about are things like moving our rating basis to land value, which I understand council will be looking at in the next year or two, so I won't speak any more about that now, but I just want to point out that I think council should be wary of viewing this as the kind of solution to the problem of land banking or inappropriate land use, when really there are more real solutions to be considered further down the line. So whichever way you vote, I just want that to be kept in mind is what I'm here to submit about, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, I have one from Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much, Jessie. I appreciate that. You intrigue me. When you talk about the different land use, how can we actually differentiate between one thing and another? Like, how would you mentioned about if you had a derelict building on a section, we could consider that to be not good use of the land. So therefore, if the landowner demolishes that building and makes a car park there, suddenly it's got some use, isn't it, because there's a car park. So how would you differentiate between that landowner getting some use out of it by being a car park, which we might consider to be absolutely underutilised, and having a derelict building on there? Would you suggest having less
Leave some time for Jessie to answer the question.
No, I totally appreciate the question.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, you don't want to have a kind of council bureaucracy where you have council officers going around and inspecting every property individually. What's nice is that Quotable Value, which does these valuations, already has figures on what the land value and what the improvements value are. So what I'm suggesting is the properties that we should be most concerned about are the ones that have zero improvements value. So in the instance you mentioned, the derelict building, if it had no use and the first thing anyone anyone would do would be to knock it down, that would have zero improvements value. Similarly, the car park, in fact, I can tell you many car parks in the centre city, such as the one on Ghuznee Street, also has zero improvement value, as in anyone who bought that, anything on the land other than land itself, worthless economically. So I think that's a good sort of test is it being used well? Is there any improvement value whatsoever? And for $4 billion of land in the city, the answer is no, and I think we should be thinking about how to solve that problem.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for taking the time to come in. Our next submitter is online. I believe you're there, Geraldine, for Inner City Wellington. Kia ora. And you have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, kia ora koutou. I'm just going to focus on the rates postponement and remissions for earthquake-strengthened buildings. ICW strongly supports the proposed postponement and remission policies for those properties being earthquake-strengthened. Many of these properties will have been identified as earthquake-prone under Council's own earthquake-prone building policy that was enforced prior to 1st of July 2017. And the cost of the current remissions policy for earthquake strengthening at $284,000 for 2022-23 is not a significant cost for WCC and other ratepayers, given the total cost faced by the owners and the citywide benefit of strengthened buildings. The proposed policy is unlikely to be a factor in owners' decisions to voluntarily strengthen, as the total cost will more than likely far exceed the remitted rates. It is a gesture by owners, by WCC towards owners to make that private investment. A number of apartment owners in earthquake-prone buildings are likely to sell once the work is completed, and under the current remissions policy would not receive any benefits. Drivers to sell are likely to be the impacts of the financial costs, the stress of the years of uncertainty, high insurance costs. So the proposed policy enables them to access some benefits during the construction, that period leading up to the completion. But there are things outside the owner's control that impact on whether they are able to access the 6 years of rebate. This is for earthquake-prone buildings. And these factors include the length of time the resource consent, building consent process can take to get approval, the time required to then finalise the costs and seek owners' approval to those amended costs where that occurs, and projected length of the construction work and unexpected issues that extend the project, as WCC is fully aware of. So I think further work is needed, obviously, to define what constitutes the period in which seismic strengthening is undertaken, which is the phrase used in the material. Many apartment owners will have spent years working through the options, the costs, the availability of funding, getting decisions agreed by owners, looking for contractors, and then before the actual construction work actually starts. And that can range from a few months, 3-4 months, to 6 months, to 12 months or even longer. So there needs to be a reasonable and pragmatic flexibility so owners can access the proposed rates postponement and remission to the fullest extent, and that includes for pre and post strengthening for earthquake-prone buildings particularly. So I've got a few wrap-up comments, but I'll just take any questions now on that.
Councillor Pannett.
Thanks, Geraldine, for your feedback on our proposal. That's really helpful. I'm just wondering, you would like some other financial support if owners have to strengthen, and what they would be? So like an outright grant, for example, a loan? Thank you.
Yes. Clearly, the costs being faced by owners are substantial, ranging from a very small number can strengthen, but costs in the tens of thousands. Frequently, it's well over 100,000. Others up to 200,000 plus 400,000 that people are looking at, even higher than that. So, I mean, ICW had put forward, along with a body corporate chair, a proposal to central government for grants for residential owners, for affected residential owners, for all owners, not just those eligible for the financial assistance scheme. we had asked WCC to support us with that grant to the Minister of Building and Construction and the Minister of Finance in the previous government, but only Councillor Pannett actually supported that proposal. We had no response from the rest of the council, the mayor or the previous mayor and the CE on that. I mean, we do need, all owners need more support to cover those financial burdens that they're facing. So yeah, I mean, this is a gesture by the council. I mean, other supports like the Building Resilience Fund for non-earthquake prone buildings has been discontinued because the previous, committees considered, or members considered, that it didn't help enough. And of course, it's not going to be the thing that makes a difference to these owners, but it is a gesture by council that this is not just a private benefit for these owners. This has been driven by public safety, and it's public benefits that have been obtained through this work that's been done.
I'm not seeing any other questions, Geraldine. So if you've got, you've still got 5 minutes. So
okay, thank you. I'll just make a couple of comments. I think the thing that the proposed purchase buyback of the land under Reading Cinema to sort of encourage an international company to comply with legislation faster than it has to under the legislation is effectively, it seems, an interest-free loan with limited ability by council to make the company comply with strengthening any faster than they're legally required to. Your department owners are spending their retirement savings, increasing mortgages, borrowing from families to comply at great personal and financial cost and risk, or they end up selling their whole buildings to exit the problem at great personal and realised financial costs. This is wrong. I think it comes back to the previous point that council needs to really, with your knowledge of what's going on under the town hall situation with other buildings coming up, really needs to sort of, I think, look to lobby the government quite strongly around the impact of this legislation on the city as a whole. But, and I think for homeowners in particular, these are people's homes that are being affected. So I just like to leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Is our next submitter online? Yes, Jared and Santamali from the Property Council. You're online? There you are. Kia ora, Kōrau, you have 10 minutes, including time for any questions. Thank you.
Kia ora katoa. Good evening, councillors. Look, thank you very much for having us today. My name's Jared Earle. I'm the chairperson for the Wellington Regional Committee for Property Council New Zealand. And on behalf of Property Council, I would like to acknowledge that I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I'd also like to introduce Sandamali Bibtia from Property Council's advocacy team. Just in note to an earlier comment as well, I'd also like to express my congratulations to Councillor Paul in respect of her recent election to Parliament. Quite a significant thing. So look, property is the fourth largest industry in Wellington, and Wellington property provides a direct contribution of 10% GDP and employment of over 20,000 Wellington residents, from planners and architects to public servants, property managers, but as well as property owners and developers. We connect property professionals and represent the interests of 134 Wellington-based member companies across the public, private and charitable sectors. Firstly, I would like to thank Wellington City Council for its continued engagement with Property Council. Our members are all very passionate about the future of Wellington City and really want to see a thriving city with fair outcomes for all. With respect to the rates differential, beginning there, I'd like to commend the Council in respect of the proposal to decrease the general rates differential for commercial, industrial and business ratepayers from 3.7 to 1 to 3.25 to 1. We would, however, recommend that the Council takes a step further to commence a planned reduction of the business differential until they are entirely removed, and replaced with alternative funding mechanisms that are fairer and more equitable. Such funding mechanisms include user pay models, special purpose vehicles, and/or targeted rates as well. With respect to the vacant sites differential, it's no secret that Wellington is an expensive city within which to do business for New Zealand, and while our members do understand the need to ensure that vacant sites do not have a negative impact on the city's amenity, we do not necessarily believe that the proposal may be the best way to achieve this, as it may be an overly simplistic or blunt tool in a similar way that the differential may be viewed, and a more targeted and nuanced approach with further detail in the policy may be required. For our members, there are a multitude of reasons why a site may be vacant or appear vacant. The development process varies, meaning that a one-size-fits-all approach cannot be applied. For example, there could be an inability to secure an anchor tenant, or a situation where there are development plans on a vacant site, but it remains vacant due to timeline sequencing within a portfolio, or due to infrastructure requirements or availability of labour or materials. Wellington is also faced with a number of vacant buildings. These often are due to high insurance costs, general costs to do business, and also seismic issues. Seismic issues specifically have seen property owners unable to afford to strengthen or choose to sell at a loss, a process which at times can take a number of years. In addition to this, in order for Wellington CBD to thrive, quality infrastructure is critical. Property Council recommends that Council take a targeted approach to discuss with the affected property owners to gain an understanding of what their plans are for the site and at what stage of development cycle they are in. Direct consultation with those who own the 60 vacant sites ensures that not all sites are being developed at the same time, which could see Council have to contribute to the infrastructure that goes alongside these developments. This would also help Council better stage and plan for future development. With respect to earthquake strengthening and the rates remission policy there, our last point, currently the Council's rates remission policy includes remission of targeted rates on properties under development or undertaking earthquake strengthening. The remission only remits targeted rates for commercial buildings that are not for purpose. Our members are concerned that property is more restrictive than its intention. That policy, apologies, is more restrictive than its intention. For example, a number of buildings in Wellington will not be defined as vacant under the policy as a proportion of the building space continues to be occupied. For instance, where a ground floor or the car park continues to be utilised. Under the current policy, this means that the building is occupied, barring those building owners from applying for earthquake strengthening benefits, while 95% of the property may actually be vacant. We recommend that the current wording in the policy is reworked to capture buildings that are partially occupied, perhaps at a 90% threshold or greater. Just to add to Geraldine Murphy's comments and the question in respect of loans and additional funding, a point that has been raised in the past to Council by others has related to the ability to access different funding mechanisms, such as lower interest loans. And this may also be something that the Council wishes to consider, given the high interest environment we are in and the challenges that many building owners, including residential building owners, will face with respect to access to funding for the purposes of earthquake strengthening. In conclusion, Property Council supports the decrease to the business differentials, however, do not support the introduction of a vacant site differential as it stands. Property owners should not be penalised for deferring development when it is not economically viable. Ensuring that the right type of development occurs at the right time for the city is critical. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, I do have a question from Councillor Pannett.
Thank you very much, very useful. Just in terms of greening our buildings, do you see there's a place for a change in our rating policy, or are you happy with the current system we've got as grants? And the second question was just around the rating differential. Do you accept that by moving it, that householders will have less money to spend with the businesses that many of us want to support? Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. So with respect to your first question. Sorry, could you just repeat that question again?
Sorry, quite a lot. Just whether you see, in terms of greening our buildings, as our fight against climate change increases, just to can we use the rating policy to help with that? Or are you happy with grants, which is we've got at the moment?
Look, I do think that the grant system is a good one. I think what we are seeing is that the market is actually undertaking a lot of the greening of our buildings in any event. However, what I would say is that when we look at buildings that do have a lower impact upon infrastructure for the city, any incentivization in that respect would be good. So, for instance, if a property owner makes an investment, a heavy investment to create a Green Star rated building that has a lower impact on energy, lower impact on water, lower impact on wastewater, ultimately that building's capital value is likely to increase. Its ratings assessment will therefore, reflect some of that. And ultimately, that property owner gets penalised. They can attract a better tenant, they can attract better tenure, and therefore the actual rates that they pay end up being higher because it's a better quality building, which is a bit of a perverse outcome when the actual impost on the city's infrastructure is less because of that building, and it is what we want to see in the city more as well. So I think further consideration could be given to that, certainly. And look, with respect to the ratings policy and the impact on, I think the important thing to consider is the equitable nature of the services to which are provided to a commercial ratepayer versus the services that are provided to a residential ratepayer. And I think the equation that needs to be undertaken in this instance is to understand whether a commercial ratepayer is receiving 3.7 times more the value from their rating dollar and the services that they receive than a residential ratepayer is.
Time for one more question from Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. Just following up on that last comment, do you think the rates review, or for that matter, the annual plan, it contains enough information to actually support the justification, outlining in terms of what services, especially services that are targeted to support businesses? Do you think there's enough information in our documentation to support the extra rates that commercial businesses pay?
Look, I've never felt that there is sufficient information, Councillor Randall, with respect to understanding what additional services are provided with respect to a ratings differential. Property Council's position has always been that targeted rates are far more clear in this respect when we can see on our ratings bill that commercial property owner can see on their ratings bill that they are paying specifically for Wellington Regional Stadium, for instance. It's good. We can understand the economic benefit. We can look at that and say there's something that we are putting our dollar into that pays back to the city. But just saying, why am I paying 3-4 times more than the residential ratepayer is another question. I think also one of those key things, partially responding to Councillor Pannett's question, as well as the increase in residential values is a really core component of this as well. So if we were to look at the increase in commercial values versus the increase in residential values, what we have seen is residential owners become, at least on paper in some instances, far more wealthy, but not have to pay a corresponding impost for the services which they are receiving from the council.
Thank you. We're out of time. Appreciate the time and effort that's gone into your submission. Thank you, Jared and Santa Maria.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to welcome our next submitter, Amy Barnett. Kia ora, Amy, and you have 5 minutes. And if you want to leave any time for questions, that would be part of that.
I'm going to have to speed read this because I didn't realise there was I didn't realise the format. So I've never done this before. So,
welcome, and just whatever. There doesn't have to be time for questions. If you just rather have your say.
Tēnā koutou councillors, ko Amy toku ingoa, ke te noho o ki te aro pōneki, e whakawhatai ana au ki te ahei kia kōrero ki tēnei kaupapa nui. Hi, my name is Amy. I'm a resident of Te Aro, Wellington Central, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to this important topic. And I'm really nervous. The submission I have drafted succinctly lays out my position, but for the purposes of this hui, I will summarise the main points, then speak to them at a more personal level. In my submission, I chose to address the focus area of fairness, considering affordability relative to matters such as income, age, and geography. To recap, I'd like to see a review that considers the following: a city that recognises its single demographic and considers rating policies with single persons in mind. A city that enables multi-unit housing as an affordable option for new homeowners. A city that ensures a fairer rate system by considering the inhabitants and size of the dwelling, not solely its capital value. And a city that supports first homeowners. For this kōrero, I thought I would start by putting a human face to this submission and briefly explain how I became a single homeowner. I was 33, and it was 2020, and I had spent 15 years of my life at that point living with others. It was great. I made some remarkable friendships, but I was beginning to tire of negotiating when the kitchen would be free, or tolerating the hideous couch or curtains the landlord had furnished the apartment with, or running late for work because a flatmate had taken longer in the bathroom in the morning, etc., etc. I had been on my own at that point for 8 years and decided I didn't want to leave the fate of a home ownership up to whether another income would present itself in my life. So I started to consider my options. I was walking to work one morning and I noticed a development advertising one-bedroom apartments starting at $420K. When I got to work, I Googled $400K in a mortgage calculator and I realised I was paying the same amount in rent as the repayments on a $400K mortgage. So I thought, okay, well, maybe this could actually be possible. With a combination of KiwiSaver, First Home Grant and savings, I could do this. Later that year, the Kiwi Build opportunity presented itself and I dove in. In order to get pre-approved from the bank, I had to provide an indication of what rates in Body Corp would look like. Querying the developer, I was told rates for similar one-bed properties in Te Aro in 2020 were between $1,700 and $1,900, give or take, and Body Corp was going to be around $3,500. I did my due diligence on these figures and looked up a few random one-beds in Te Aro through the property search mechanism on the council website, and the figure the developer provided checked out thereabouts. Therefore, in total, it was looking like Body Corp and rates would be around $5K per annum. This is the figure I provided the bank. The reality, after 2 years in my apartment, Body Corp and rates combined have now increased to $8,500 per annum for a 40 square metre apartment, with rates now double the figure I was told in 2020 and Body Corp insurance having increased 60% since settlement. I'd also like to point out that I'm paying rates based on a capital value that is now actually worth $200K less. So I'm being charged for my property being worth $740K, but in reality it's currently worth about $550K according to QV. In any case, to me, that's irrelevant, as I didn't buy my apartment for its capital value or to climb the property ladder and build a property portfolio. I was approaching mid-30s and I just wanted to live with dignity in my own space, as well as start planning more seriously for the future. Every person should have that opportunity, regardless of their relationship status. I'm one person, but there are many stories like mine, so I'm really trying to speed here. I know of 9 others in my circle, mix of colleagues and friends, mostly women, in a similar situation, and not to mention all the single homeowners that live in my building. We are a growing demographic, and this one-size-fits-all residential rating policy does not translate to the multitude of different ways people are living in 2023. It's outdated and doesn't consider the diversity of residents and spaces they occupy. I'd also like to point out that multi-unit dwellings are part of the solution towards developing a climate-resilient city that ensures affordable housing for all. However, currently, as I've just demonstrated, multi-unit housing is expensive and rates don't make allowances for the difference in services these residences receive. To encourage and support intensified living, it must be more affordable, and rating policies should be equitably designed to reflect the different spaces people occupy. As one of the more progressive councils in the motu right now, Wellington City Council has an opportunity to lead by example and design pluralist policies that are inclusive of all household types. We are a vibrant and diverse cultural centre, and we can influence at the local level the people we attract to our city. I envision a singles-friendly city that coexists with families and other household demographics. I recognise the ideas I'm proposing are out of scope for the suggested changes in the current review, but as the long-term plan is still up for discussion, I saw this forum as an opportunity to get out ahead of that and start the conversation by raising some of these issues to begin receiving some consideration on them from policymakers. Nā mihi ki te konihira mō tēnei wā. Thank you and acknowledgements to the Council for this time.
Perfect timing and absolutely no need to be nervous because that was amazing. Ngā mihi, Amy, and I just want to thank you for raising in actually a different perspective that we haven't really heard as part of this process and giving us a lot to think about. I really appreciate it. We hope we'll see you again.
Okay, yeah, I know, this is the first time.
Yeah, thank you. Our next submitter, Steve West, welcome to the podium. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou. Today I've brought councillors a koha. This contains some of our common, yet apparently significant mahui and rangiora, along with some unwanted trade scantia, which you may recognise as it's widely seen across the city, including on council-owned land. To start, I have read the consultation document and was disappointed to see the statement on page 11, again deferring decisions on a rates remission for landowners with SNAs. But first, to set the scene, the fact is Paniki is experiencing an explosion of native birds with pests in decline. At our place in Nio, trapping continues and flocks of kaka are now regular visitors. Wellington's soaring wildlife has absolutely nothing to do with SNAs but does reflect strong citywide conservation activities. For now, SNAs on private urban land are excluded from the proposed district plan, but entities such as Forest and Bird and the Council's own Environmental Reference Group are seeking to reverse this via the hearings process. The National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity has finally been gazetted, but the new government has made election promises to reduce the scope of what might be classified as an SNA. And Wellington landowners facing the brunt of Council's SNA policy remain in limbo while Council refuses to give details on compensation for the significant loss of land value that will arise from the imposition of SNAs on their land. As I've explained previously, the best solution for Wellington would be to permanently exclude SNAs from private urban land and instead develop a program to supercharge citywide planting of native trees to ensure plenty of food for our birds. Instead, Council seems intent on progressing with this SNA folly, despite the chilling effect it will likely have on Wellington's conservation activities and to our Indigenous biodiversity. Now, getting back to the consultation document. This explains the reason for deferring decisions on an SNA remission is because further SNA work is unlikely to occur until after the 2023-24 long-term plan is complete. Conveniently, it also allows Council to keep impacted landowners in the dark while arguments for reintroducing SNAs into the proposed district plan are being made behind their backs. Furthermore, it delays Council having to publicly announce the need to offer a rates remission to about 1,280 urban landowners for just 330 hectares of private land that will be captured as an SNA. And given this SNA remission could easily cost Council $8 million annually, it seems odd that Council does not want these details to be considered as part of its broader ratings policy review. That said, I do not support SNAs on private land, so in that context, there is no need for a rates remission. Instead, Wellingtonians would be left in peace to continue with their conservation activities unhindered. In closing, I have 3 messages I would like to share. Firstly, imposing SNAs on private urban land has real consequences for landowners, so it really is unacceptable that Council continues to leave people, like me, completely in the dark about its full intentions. Secondly, Council finances are under significant pressure, and given the SNA remissions will at best only offset the policy harm, it would be better for all parties to simply stop the creation of SNAs on private urban land. And lastly, I would like to encourage each of you to take time to visit some impacted landowners, to understand the challenges that will arise from having an SNA, perhaps even a councillor field trip. Thank you for your time.
I have a question from Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. Very excellent points, and I support you. One question, you talk about SNAs on private urban land. Do you think the same principle applies to the significant natural areas in the rural sector as well? Because we've got a lot of rural areas that are SNA'd.
Look, arguably, you could argue the same points. I haven't thought too hard about that. I guess because there's a large number of urban residents with bits of land that will become an SNA, and it varies. And you're right, in the rural area, there is absolutely similar issues. I guess the reason I think about it for us is about 45% of our land will become an SNA. And that's the crux of it.
Steve, I have a question. Are you aware of any city councillor or officer who is promoting bringing back the SNA policy, other than the discussion that is happening through the hearing process, which is, a sort of a public democratic process?
So where we're at is, as you would remember from last year's meeting, the decision was to defer SNAs, any further discussions on SNAs on private land, until after the policy statement was gazetted, now done, and a proposal is put forward to councillors around rates remission or something similar. So it was never taken off the table, it was just deferred.
Thank you, Steve. We're out of time. Thank you very much for taking the time to come in, and thank you for your koha. I would now like to welcome Catherine McCluskey to the podium. Welcome, Catherine, and you have 5 minutes, including time for questions if you want to leave any time for that.
Kia ora, councillors. The current rates increases are unsustainable. Taxes don't go up in the same way, and yet it would be a fairer system. One size does not fit all in our city, and I have always believed that the purpose of a community is to look after its more vulnerable members, and yet you don't do this. The current valuation system for house property values does not consider the incomes that the people who live in those houses make. This creates an unequal rate system which targets people of low or middle incomes, and especially people and families living on single incomes or benefits. In particular, women who live longer than men and usually outlive partners, often ending up single at a time in their lives when they most need the support of their communities. The rates rebate scheme needs a complete overhauling. The rates rebate scheme needs a complete overhauling, as it only sets a capped amount which is minuscule, and if you earn just over the threshold, you cannot apply for it, even if your rates bill is crippling you financially. A fairer system would be for the rebate to be a proportion of your rates, i.e. at least a third or half of what your rates bill is, if you are entitled to the rebate. Secondly, increasing the rates rebate amount earned. This then needs to be increased with the cost of living each year. This would stop the forcing of pensioners, single people, beneficiaries, low-income earners and others out of their communities where they have been living, simply because their house prices have increased in value and the rates have been driven up. This destroys the fabric and makeup of our communities. The Council, in theory, wants to build sustainable communities and robust communities, and yet your current policies do the exact opposite by tearing families, friends, and neighbours apart. In order to have robust communities, you must have a mixture of people from different socio-economic backgrounds, cultures, and ages. Therefore, rates cannot be the same for everyone in a suburb. If rates are too high in a suburb, you end up with rich enclaves, creating an imbalance and often a lack of understanding of the wider needs of others in the society, as they are not visible to them. Fixing rates on land house value, as opposed to income, does not support robust, multicultural and diverse communities. The current policies around rates for many of us feel like living euthanasia. Are the older members of our community just a nuisance because they no longer contribute in a way you would like them to? Have you any idea of the stresses you are causing on a daily basis with the constant threat of rates increases? And that's what it feels like, a threat. I am asking you to lift your heads up from your figures and fact sheets and look at the people in front of you who are suffering because of these increases. See the faces before you of real people, as individuals and as communities. We are already stressed, exhausted, and struggling to make ends meet from our crippling rates. When we can no longer afford to pay, what will you do? Take away our homes? The one place where we can find refuge from the outside world? Action points. Increase the rates rebate so it is a percentage and not a capped amount. 2, increase the amount you earn to access the rebate, so more people are entitled to a rebate. Fix this against the cost of living index and inflation, so the amount is increased as the cost of living increases. Do not fix rates on house and land values. This causes extreme financial difficulty for many just because you live in a particular area, regardless of what you earn. Keep our communities socio-economically diverse, not wealthy enclaves, as this enhances our understanding of each other, and without this, we cannot move forward as a society.
Thank you, Catherine. I have a question. Are you aware that Council doesn't have the power to set rates on the basis of income, that we have to do it?
I am aware of that, and that's why I figured that the best way was for you to give people money back through the rates rebate scheme. And the rates rebate scheme does take into account what you earn. But at the moment, for many people, if you're just in that area, you're not entitled to it, even though you might be living on a single income.
Thank you. Are you also aware that the rates rebate settings are also set by central government?
No, I'm not, but maybe that's something for you to lobby central government about.
Thank you very much. We're out of time. We really appreciate you taking the time to come in. Our next submitter is Chamber of Commerce.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ahi Mari. Good afternoon. I work for the Wellington Chamber of Commerce and lead our policy and advocacy work. Firstly, I'd like to thank councillors and officers for the opportunity to provide comment on the ratings policies review, and thank you for taking the time to review our submission, and thank you for this opportunity to present to you today. I'd also like to echo the comments of others to congratulate Tōtōpū on your recent election, a huge achievement. As many of you will know, the Chamber of Commerce has represented organisations in Wellington for over 165 years. We are one of the longest standing membership bodies in Aotearoa, New Zealand. In the city, we represent over 1,000 organisations of all shapes and sizes, from small family businesses to non-profits and incorporated societies, as well as some of the largest businesses and property owners in the region. As such, we don't speak as a single voice, but rather see ourselves to represent the collective views of a significant proportion of businesses and enterprises across Te Whanganui-a-Tara. Please keep this in mind as you review our submission and hear from me today. I'll try to not fill all of the time so as to allow for questions, and I'll take our submission as read, so we won't go through the detail in full, but if there's anything in particular you'd like to follow up on, please don't hesitate to get in touch after the session. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Curtin Lees from the Wellington-based economic consultancy Sense Partners, who authored the report that was appended to our submission, Tax and the City, a closer look at the business differential and land taxation. Curtin is also available to answer questions following the presentation, but I'll very quickly summarise the findings of that report as well. In summary, the report found that there is an opportunity for the city to flourish by improving revenue-raising settings. Wellington's high business differential is likely to be reducing employment growth, crimping powerful agglomeration effects that would lift productivity and wages for workers. Thirdly, the ratings base is too narrow. I think a few people have spoken to that today. More work could be done to expand funding and financing services. In addition, user charging, such as volumetric and wastewater, should be more widely implemented to recoup the cost of service provision. And fourthly, while taxing land rather than capital may offer some efficiencies, any shift brings distinct political difficulties and is by no means a silver bullet. A huge amount of work and analysis would need to be required to properly understand the implications of that question. And finally, a simple and predictable tax system is required to support firms and households make better choices. So those were, in summary, what the report found. Before I get going, I want to make clear that the Chamber sees this as the start of a conversation around the long-term sustainability of Wellington's finances. We support the Council's commitment to continue to explore issues surrounding the rating base following the implementation of the 2024-2034 long-term plan, and we look forward to further engagement on this issue. As a new government takes charge in the coming weeks, we believe there's a real opportunity for Wellington to lead the national Kōrau around how local government is funded across Aotearoa. The Sense Partners report and analysis aims to provide a robust data-led contribution to this wider discussion. At the outset, I'd like to wholeheartedly welcome the Council's proposal to reduce the differential from 3.7 to 3.25 from July next year. This reduction is a welcome step that will help to ease the burden on Wellington businesses when wider commercial pressures are considerable. Analysis shows that further reducing the differential could induce a $29.3 million increase in citywide GDP. The Chamber also welcomes the principles behind the Council's proposals to introduce a new vacant land differential of 4.5 to 1. We hope this will drive improvements in our cityscape. However, I would like to acknowledge the concerns of the Property Council and other commercial property owners in the city, as there is a risk of incentivising hasty rather than optimal investment and development. So should Council choose to proceed with this initiative, we'd really encourage officers to work closely with the property sector to clearly and carefully define this policy to limit unintended consequences. In addition, the Chamber also encourages Council to explore a range of additional revenue measures as enumerated by the Sense Partners report, though critically, not to increase the tax take, but instead to reduce the cost of raising revenue through any single lever, thus limiting the pressure on general and commercial ratepayers. We urge Council to press ahead with volumetric and wastewater charges, better align development contributions to the context and cost of services, and increase the use of special purpose vehicles for funding specific infrastructure projects. It would be remiss to discuss future ratings policy without acknowledging the challenging financial context the city finds itself in. I must talk briefly about council debt. Now, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but like everyone in this room, I've read various reports, and I'm concerned, and our members are concerned. High levels of debt are not sustainable in the long term. This is a point the Chamber has made repeatedly, and ultimately risk further increasing the burden on ratepayers. In the absence of a clear, transparent and up-to-date reporting from the Council regarding the state of the city's books, which I do trust will follow in due course, businesses and would-be investors risk basing decision-making on media reports and hearsay. And now this is good for no one. Clearly, Council is going to have to make some very difficult decisions over the weeks and months ahead, quite possibly requiring cuts to capital projects and services, and the sooner we can have an open and informed debate about the challenges facing our city, the better. In this vein, we urge Council to clearly communicate its overarching vision for the long-term future of Wellington. Again, I don't know all the details of the plans for the Reading Cinema site, and I appreciate that negotiations are commercially sensitive and often require strict levels of confidentiality. Similarly, I don't know the ins and outs of spending decisions relating to the town hall, though of course I can understand and appreciate the risks and challenges involved when working with heritage buildings. Business gets it too. Firms in the city don't expect the council to sit on its hands and cut spending entirely. But what industry does need to better understand is the framework for how council makes its decisions and what it's trying to achieve. Why council is making often hugely costly decisions must be tied back to the longer-term plan for Wellington's economy. At the moment, this isn't necessarily being effectively communicated and worked through. So every new report of council overspend ratchets up uncertainty and damages confidence. As a result, the perception develops that council doesn't triage or down-select projects. If a big bill comes up, council will be on the hook and work out how to pay later. A renewed focus on cost control, combined with improved communication and business engagement, will really help to arrest this narrative. That's my view. Businesses in our capital understand that the much-needed programme of upgrades and improvements scheduled by the council over the years ahead will be costly and time-consuming. However, and as we set out in the Wellington report last year, the council needs to provide greater certainty around future costs. This will enable businesses to better prepare and plan, and we welcome the opportunity that this review presents to shift Wellington's ratings policy to a longer-term footing. To conclude, while getting the rating setting right presents real opportunities for economic growth in Wellington, this problem can't be considered in isolation. Besides the high differential, the city faces other handicaps. The cost and availability of insurance, for example, is a principal concern, and it's been mentioned by a number of people already today. Members tell us that they can no longer afford the insurance costs of local warehousing and so are instead shifting inventory to Palmy. For others, it's not a question of costs. Insurance just isn't available. Seismic risk in Wellington is just too high. Now, former Mayor Andy Foster's insurance task force made some progress on raising the profile of this issue, but critically, the core challenge remains. So we urge the Mayor and councillors to revisit the issue with urgency and engage with us and the wider business community to present the scale of the problem to central government. So we urge the Council to consider our set of recommendations and believe that doing so would help unlock economic growth and opportunities for Wellington. Thanks again for your time today. Kia pai tō rā, kia ora.
Well, we might just have time for one question. Councillor Whiringa.
Hey, kia ora, thank you for that. Just reading through your submission, would it be correct to say that your position is that the vacant land differential is an imperfect solution to a problem which a land value tax might more elegantly solve?
So I think, but bearing in mind we represent the interests of a wide range of businesses in the city. It's, I think, universally agreed that there are a significant number of properties in Wellington that are at least perceived to be empty for a long time, and that is sometimes seen to blight the city and damages retailers who are trading next to those places, and people are really keen to see those places revitalised. Now, the differential is something that we've advocated for, the 4.5 differential is something we've advocated for previously. We've seen it implemented in Christchurch, but certainly I think it needs to be really worked through from a policy perspective to make sure that we don't fall into all of those unintended consequences. And I'm conscious there's probably someone from the commercial property world coming to speak to you shortly who will have more to say on that matter. So imperfect solution, but certainly it's a nut that needs to be cracked.
Thanks, Ed. Sorry, we are out of time. I just want to highlight the great title of the report, Tax in the City. I may be the perfect demographic to enjoy that. And also to note, many of the questions you have asked will be the beginning of an answer when our papers come out tomorrow for our next LTP committee meeting. So we'll continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would now like to welcome our Aharoni. Kia ora, you have 10 minutes.
We got a presentation. I got my daughter here, and we need, how do we score? Where's the presentation?
You should have
I've got it here. She'll work it out.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Ask a young person. That's the strategy. You have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Okay. I've got a lot of things to say. I'm going to really rush it. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for your time. My name is Whiringa-ā-rangi. I know I don't sound like local, but I've been living in Wellington for 35 years. I'm director of Prime Property Group. Prime is a Wellington-based property organisation. We employ 230 permanent staff and many hundreds of contractors. We are a large hotel provider, parking provider, office provider. We strengthened and upgraded many Wellington office buildings. We are a large residential new housing provider. I want to deal with the question, should we impose higher rates on vacant industrial land, residential land? The answer is no. The outcome will be exactly the opposite of what you are trying to achieve, less houses. I will give you an example. Prime have been developing housing in Newlands, right beside the motorway, by the public transport corridor for the past 20 years. These are modest houses. When we started, after a few years of planning battles, council only approved 30 houses on the massive 40-hectare site. 30 houses on such a large site could not have been modest. We have engaged in litigation. We've getting litigated and planning application with council ever since to enable more houses on the site. We currently have planning permission for about 250 houses. About 200 are now built. We believe 350 is the right number. We are still arguing with the council. As we speak, council have in its consent processing department application for about 40 houses that have been sitting there now for about 18 months. Council wants us to upgrade some non-related roading away from the site in exchange for consent. This is just one of many examples. I can provide many more, mine and others. After all these years of opposition by council, it's beyond belief. The council now thinks that it can fix things by applying more tax. Developers who always try to provide more houses. Should council burden land with more tax, easy way out will be to develop less houses. That is including non-developers, landholders. If council can differentiate between the two, and it can't. Once low density is developed, it will stay that way for many, many years. Do not put vacant residential land rate up or it will cause unintended consequences. The second thing I want to deal with is differential rating option. First, I want to congratulate you for considering a reduction in differential. For the healthy future of the city, you must drop the differential altogether. You are very aware of difficulties commercial property owners are facing in recent years. Your own council experience show council office buildings have been now vacant for 6 years, over 6 years, due to seismic problems, challenges. Council attempt to repair the town hall backfired. Michael Fowler issues. This is just a small list of council challenges with operating its own commercial property portfolio. We are no different. This example demonstrates the struggle Wellington commercial property owners are facing every day. Almost every commercial property in Wellington now requires seismic upgrade. Our insurance costs have ballooned. However, unlike council, we cannot move to another building when it gets too hard to fix our own building. We can't raise more rents when repair costs and insurance costs double or triple. However, long term, it's not the landlords that are paying the price, it's the city. I will explain. Although we can't have an annual meeting and set our rates to recover our cost, but over a longer period, rents are lifted to cover required costs, otherwise nothing can be done. So after a while, Wellington businesses are the ones who are paying the cost, and so are consumers, because the businesses needs to recover its cost as well to stay afloat. High commercial rates will be making Wellington even a harder place to do business, and as we have been seen recently in many years, many businesses left town. There should be no differential. The only reason there is a differential is because your predecessors wanted to retain their job by putting commercial rates up in order to keep residential rates down, to be popular with voters. Please be honest. That's the only reason. Let's have a look at all the issues the council is dealing with at the moment. Library, town hall, Michael Fowler, leaking pipe, council offices, building, reading cinema, sewage plants, you name it. All the costs that are associated with running the city should not be applied to commercial property any different than applied to residential property. Further, in recent years, more so during COVID, trend has been emerging that many employees are working from home. Therefore, commercial activity is actually taking place at home these days. Let's look at a normal week where a person works, say, 2 days at the home and 3 days at the office. That's 24 working hours per week at the office, and 144 working hours, not working, are at home. So if a differential is required, maybe it's the wrong way around. Commercial rate-wise, Wellington is the most expensive place to do business in the country by a large margin. We have extracted these numbers from council's website and compare rates for commercial building of $1.5 million value in Wellington and other cities. Can you see the graph? No, you can't see it. It's behind you, is it? Can you see it? Oh, you got it. Sorry. Okay. As you can see, out of $1.5 million building in Wellington, roughly $22,000. In Auckland is $8,000. This is what you're paying in Auckland. Dunedin seems to be high, but we are substantially higher. Now, what we've done here, you may not agree with these numbers because your numbers are different, but these numbers include the regional council and includes all the fees, which is what we're actually paying. So these are true numbers, okay? To keep, how long have I got? 4 minutes. To keep the city viable, you must reduce the differential. May I suggest some cost saving that will reduce the rates for all? Please consider. Do not proceed with the Golden Mile work. 90% of business are telling you it will harm their business. Their interest is the same as yours. Be vibrant and successful. Proceeding with undermining their business. Listen to them. They know what's good for them and us. There is a better way. Move one bus route, the northern bound, out of the Golden Mine to Jervis Key. Keep the southbound in the Golden Mine and leave the cars there. Do not turn the rest of the Golden Mile into a massive bus corridor like what was done to Manor Street. This is a photo in Manor Street 2 weeks ago. This is Manor Street. Fix the old library to 67% NBS. Will probably cost you 25 million. There's a few people behind me. You're spending their money. Okay, the people in front of me, they're complaining about rates, as well as myself. You're spending that money. You put in a new library at a cost of 200 million. You can do it for $25 million. Just fix it to 67%. Fix your own council building to 67%. It has to be done. It can be done. That's how the rest of us has to live. We can't build new buildings based on solar. We have to fix what we got. You need to fix what you got as well, and you can save your ratepayers' money. Demolish the town hall. I do not believe that demolition of town hall will cost 100 million, as reported. Impossible. Build a new one. We live in a high seismic risk city. That's the cost of living here. All buildings sometimes needs to go. Even if you fix the town hall at the cost of 350 million, in 10 years' time, new engineers and new rules will more than likely define it as aspect prone, as it happened to many buildings. I believe this is the fourth time, I've been told, this is the fourth time we're fixing the town hall. Okay, 10 years' time, you'll have to fix it again. Knock it off. Retain the Michael Fowler car park. Council contracted to sell this car park for a song about 2 years ago for $1.5 million and not yet got paid for it. Cancel that contract. You will need this land to repair or redevelop the Michael Fowler Town Hall. The Michael Fowler, the Town Hall, it's not too late. The buyer will agree because it has a long, ongoing, exclusive relationship with you. One last thing, I want to thank you for the cycle lanes. I mostly commute on a bike and I thoroughly enjoy the cycle lanes, mainly because there's hardly anyone else there. I know I pay a lot of rates, but no one ever told me that you use my money to provide me private cycle lanes. Thank you. Live within our means, keep rates down, abolish the differential.
I have a question from Councillor Young.
Thank you very much. Of course, I think I agree with everything you say.
We're actually not into...
My question is, could you just tell us what you are doing with the Amora Hotel?
What I'm doing with Amora Hotel, I'm considering whether repair or a new building is appropriate, and it's not a 5-minute job, and I'm working on it. Right now, we're starting repairing the James Smith car park building. By the way, it was in the consent process for 2 years. We just received it about a month ago. So the James Smith car park is now being repaired. It will take 2 years, okay? And we are looking at the Amora, but right now there is option whether to demolish it. The site will be suitable for a bigger building, better building. The Amora has got low start. There's pros and cons, so we are still working on that. We actually has designed the repair, but we're not sure it's the right thing to do.
Thank you.
Quick question from Councillor Pennant? No. Okay. All right. No, we're out of time.
Where's MP?
No, we're out of time. Thank
where's
you.
Where's MP Tamata? He hasn't gone because I'm in Israel.
Excuse me. We've run out of time.
Huh?
Al, thank you. We're out of time. Thank you very much. All right. We are now ready for our last submission. I believe John Swan is here on behalf of a group of residents. Kia ora, John. You have 10 minutes, including time for questions.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to the submission that most of you will have read. I understand the Mayor hasn't read it, albeit that she's been prepared to comment on it in a council issued media release. This review is a review of the long-term plan for the next 10 years. The LTP, as outlined in a roadmap that was issued to citizens who were part of a consultation back in March, says the council will consult with the community about priorities as to levels of service, significant projects and asset investment requirements. Now, they're quotes from the consultation documentation. The rates reviewed documentation issued by the council contains a number of options for the submitters to choose from. This does not amount to a consultation. The agenda is set by the council with various options predetermined by the council, it's a sham. In reality, the council doesn't have a plan. It has some ideas and it needs to embed decisions already made by a majority of the council since its term began. This is despite a clear warning given to incoming councils in the post-election briefing by council officers that the incoming council will need to manage affordability by making choices about the priority of capital programs and the affordability of some council services. This will involve considering the viability of the council's range of services and the level to which services are provided. No heed has been given to that warning, and neither has the rate payer or those that pay rent been notified of the fiscal environment recklessly created by the current council that the city now confronts. In particular, no financial information has been released in any relevant way to allow rate and rent payers to assess their ability to fund the grandiose plans that the majority of councillors have rammed through the council processes, and in doing so created liabilities to be paid for by increased debt, sale of assets or rates increases. Neither has the Mayor or her Chief Executive deemed it necessary to advise councillors in general of the financial impact of the plans already in place. This is what prompted my fellow submitters and myself to commission a review of the city's finances from the limited and dated information publicly available and largely contained in the last edition of the LTP, the long-term plan that dates back to 2021. This submission in its totality was lodged with the council and its LTP unit, where it languished for a week and was later released by the submitters to the media. The $1 billion hole is detailed in the submission. It is correctly included in this rating review as it provides the only opportunity for ratepayers to participate in the long-term plan until March or April of next year, when the council will have predetermined both its policy and the terms that will apply to consultation, if indeed the majority of councillors provide that opportunity. The submission details the proposition to assist all its providers with graphs. It's not a long document, it's 5 pages. There's some good graphs in there that visually represent the problems that the city currently confront. We acknowledge the submitters that the submission is based on figures provided in the last LTP. This is the only information publicly available, apart from an annual plan released last Friday, that councillors were asked to sign a resolution approving it without the opportunity to peruse its content. There is another tranche of documents to be released tomorrow, and it'll be treated, no doubt, in the same way. The submission that we've made has been treated discursively. The Mayor, despite having stated to the media, "I have not read the submission and will not do so, and I will reply on the open and honest advice of council officers, and consultation will be available early next year." Now is the time to identify the financial cost, updated for current projects like the Town Hall, and as actual as is possible for projects such as the sludge minimisation plant, zero waste and Golden Mile projects. Now, they're just a few of the projects that have been initiated by this council and are currently a contingent liability on the balance sheet of the council. What we need is transparency to enable informed decision-making both across the council, with sufficient time for rate and rent payers to be meaningfully consulted with accurate information that can be tabulated as to what entity will make the payment, what amount will be allocated to an increase in debt, what proportion will be asked of the ratepayers to pay in addition to their already excessive rate demands, and the impact that increased debt will have on other operating expenses, on the operating expenses of the council. Ratepayers cannot continue to be notified of last-minute rates increases in order that the books be balanced. Neither can council laws be gagged or bullied because information is released in public excluded portions of full council or committee meetings. There is a financial crisis. This must be recognised by council. The LTP process should be used as a medium for open and constructive dialogue between council across the political divides. The rate and rent payers should have adequate time and information to become part of that to contribute to an outcome that is tenable. The LTP process should be paused to allow this dialogue, to enable unbridled release of financial information and to allow all priorities to be established in accordance with the requirements of the long-term plan and the options to be fully discussed with full knowledge of outcomes, be it rate increases, additional debt or asset sales. This general rates review portion of the LTP process provides the opportunity for the matters detailed in the submission that we've given to you to be addressed publicly. Failure to take this action will be noted by central government and your constituents. Neither councillors or its ratepayers want government intervention. This submission and further work in process on debt levels that is being undertaken, the ability to service debt ceilings can only be properly addressed if full disclosure and open dialogue can be achieved immediately. The alternative amounts to a receivership of the city and the liquidation of ratepayers' assets. I'm happy to answer any questions arising.
Councillor Randall.
So I understand a big challenge is the release of information. My question to you is, given it's an iterative process to put a long-term plan together, do you think that the public should be at least informed of some of the draft amounts?
Councillor, I do note we're in hearings about the ratings policy review. But could you make a question that has got some relevance to the ratings policy review?
I think the availability of information is very relevant to the rating review. You can't do it in a vacuum. I think it was noted in the media that democracy dies in darkness, and this is a pretty dark place.
Councillor Foon. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Sorry, who?
Actually, I'll refrain.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. We've got no more questions. I'd like to thank you for your time.
Good evening.
All right, councillors, we now will move on to receiving these submissions. So the report, which is the submissions. Does anybody have any questions of officers before we move into the debate?
Councillor Randall.
Councillor Randall.
I'm sorry, just in relation to the remissions policy related to the SNAs, in terms of the council officers, is that still something that's under consideration for the rates review?
I think we're midway through a process, and the really important part of this process is taking on board the feedback that we've received. So we were quite clear and deliberate that we were, putting information out to collect submissions from the public so that we could take that into consideration to then have the conversation about next steps with you. So all of the submissions we'll look at, we'll consider, we'll bring some advice back to you and have a discussion with you on what that looks like.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Does this hearing help us with the decision that we are going to make on the November 9? Is there any relationship between today's hearing and any paper that is coming?
No, not to any great extent. So the rating policy review is about how we divide up the pie. The decisions that we're seeking from council or the committee on the 9th is about the size of the pie. So there's an inherent relationship. The really important thing to note is that you know, you need to look at all of this and bring it all together at some point in time. And the reason we went out and consulted on the rating policy review now is to give an opportunity to hear from the public about their feedback so that it could be taken on board and that we can bring that in together in the same way we'll look at the decisions around the 9th of November as well. So, you know, and actually there's another opportunity for the community to consult on to provide feedback on the rating policy review, because we're going to include that in the LTP. But when we do it later on in the process, it means we can't adapt and we can't, you know, so we wanted to do it nice and early so we could actually hear the feedback, take it on board and actually have a good, you know, consultation process.
A follow-up to that is, will this make a difference if we delay this hearing for 10 days, which is after the November 9? Will that make a difference?
No.
Okay, noted.
All right, there's no further questions. I will move, there's a slight amendment to what was in the papers, which is the motion is to receive the information and thank the oral submitters, because we keep our manners about us at all times. So I will move. Councillor Panovich, would you like to second? So yes, so it's just to receive the information and thank the oral submitters. Oh, sorry, councillors, if you could come back for the vote. Councillor Young? And Councillor Brown? Absent without leave. We'll vote on that. That is carried. Thank you, councillors. Tēnā kua mutu te hui. I declare the meeting closed. Me karakia tātou. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapunui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, i te ara takatū, koe ara e rongo whakairia a ki ki runga. Kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia.